All right. So first of all, we thought that it might be fun to start with some out of the house ideas, in case you want to get out there and shake things up. So the first thing that we were going to talk about is the library. So the library can be a really excellent way to entertain your kids for a variety of reasons. I feel like people often discount just how much you can get out of a library, but let's think about it a little bit more. Sure, not only do you get to have a wide variety of books to read with your kids, either while at the library or to take home, but you can use those books to teach them so many things depending on their stage of life. So, for example, you can teach them quite simply how to read, or you can take out books about crafts and experiments that you can try at home. You can take out books about learning new skills or, techniques for coping with mental health challenges. The list is honestly practically endless. And reading with your children is a really excellent bonding experience that allows you to teach and engage with them just so much. But there's even more than that, because there are often many other things that you can do with the library as well. There are, often computers that you can use with your kids, which, hey, some people may not even have easy access to computers. So that can be a really great way to be able to get online and do things with them. There are often, scheduled activities such as book fairs, reading groups, games, they may even have board games set up. There's really so much to do at the library. And of course, there are often, yearly events as well. So you can ask the staff directly, or there will often be little bulletin boards with postings for activities, either at the library or elsewhere. And, to be honest, very young children are often just enthralled at being out of the house in a new building. When I was a little kid, I was excited to have my mom take me to the library just so that I could push the buttons in the elevator. So the mind boggles at all the things that you can do at the library. Chris, feel free to just jump in at any point here if you have anything you'd like to add.
Oh, for sure. No, I think you're doing great. Yeah, for sure. The only thing I would add is I've been there myself and I've taken my kids there. So maybe I should have started with that. I'm a father of 3 and have raised children from 0 to 20, and I've had my own experiences being a single dad and struggling financially. So that's, I suppose, what I bring to the table tonight. That's valuable or might be worthwhile. And I'd also say too that if you're really struggling the way I was and even didn't have internet because I couldn't afford it at the time, it was even a place to go where my kids could read and I could work on things like, I don't know, paperwork or anything that I required internet for, really. So I would share that too.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it's, sometimes it's not even necessarily about doing things together, but it's also about finding ways to keep them happy while you're able to get things done that you need to do, because that's just as important, because being a mother of now a 6-month-old infant and a toddler, it's definitely not always easy to get that time in there. I see that Sean has his hand up. You can go ahead and unmute, Sean.
Another awesome place too, maybe is a suggestion. Now, I see you're in Calgary, right?
Yeah.
That's my hometown, born and raised, but I live in Ottawa now.
Okay.
But you have IKEA there as well. Another really cool place to get work done, and they've got the Wi-Fi. Is I'll bring my kids, and there's often open areas depending on the hour you go. You can all sit down and have a meal. And then they can, if you, I don't know, go on there's sometimes computers and stuff for them, and then you can get your work done as well. So just another thing that I found kind of helpful. Unfortunately, our library here, it being the nation's capital, isn't as beautiful as back home. So I'm looking at that and I'm just drooling. I'm I wish the library here was that nice to take them. So just thought I'd throw that in.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Montreal has a gorgeous library, but Ottawa, unfortunately, it's a bit of a dump.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, for anybody else, if anybody else just wants to like share experiences at any point, feel free. Like obviously we kind of we can't just let it be a total free for all, but I really enjoy people like sharing their own experiences with things as well. So thanks so much for that. So as Reagan has displayed on our screen here, we have the museum as another option next. So this is another really fabulous choice to entertain children of all ages. So you can look up information about like different museums in your area, of course, and find find ones that are friendly for smaller children, with more activities targeted to them. For example, I know offhand, like there's a museum in Winnipeg that is specifically a children's museum that might be a little bit more targeted towards very little children. And then you can also just like look up like any other museums that might be more targeted to, older children, or that might be kind of more of an all ages sort of thing. And all children really will get a lot out of looking at different exhibits, I find. So it can be a really, really great excuse to engage with them, to explain about, history, geology, whatever else might be on display. And the nice thing is that a lot of the times museums will have only nominal fees or even a pay what you can system. So it can feel like a bigger outing for the kids without costing an arm and a leg. So now we can go ahead and switch to the next one. I see in the chat that somebody said Fish Creek Library has sing-alongs and story time at 10:15 on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And that's exactly right. Like all the different kinds of libraries will have different activities, and it's really nice to be able to engage with them in so many different ways. Okay, so the next one on here is, of course, neighborhood parks. So neighborhood parks are often a great option for children, and it allows them a space to be able to get out some of that very abundant kinetic energy without worrying about too much household destruction. So they're often easy to get to. And a bonus is that there are often multiples in different neighborhoods nearby. So that exploratory aspect can be very appealing to children. It's like, okay, let's go to the one near our house. Now, okay, let's maybe take a longer walk and explore the one in the next neighborhood over, or like, ooh, even the one in the nearby schoolyard, that kind of thing. So it can be lots of fun to find different parks. So then we can move on to the next one, which is, public city parks. Now, these are kind of like neighborhood parks on steroids. Oftentimes, a lot of these open parks will have like much more broad activities to do, like swimming facilities, as is displayed here in Prairie Winds Park. That's in the northeast of Calgary. They have many different things that you can do that other than what you might find locally. So rather than just having, your standard playground equipment, this park, for example, has this large outdoor swimming area. It has a large hill that you can, take your kids tobogganing down, or even just rolling down in the summertime, although I'm not sure I recommend it with how tall that hill is. There's all kinds of other structures as well, like great big slides and things like that. And, frankly, all of this stuff is just fun to climb on. There's rope structures everywhere. There's even a small garden with lots of flowers to appreciate, on a long walking path with wide grassy hills, food trucks to get tasty snacks at to cap it all off with. And barring the food trucks, of course, most of these activities, they don't even cost a dime except for the gas it takes to drive there. So, and Sean has just said he's getting homesick. Aw. Yeah, I believe that, with getting everybody back in traveling right now is really expensive. He just says getting all of us back there is easily $3,000. My goodness, domestic flights are ridiculous right now. All right. So yeah, I know that I took my daughter here last year when she was just 2, and just we could spend an entire day doing just one of these activities and then come back the next day and do an entire set of different things. So yeah, these kinds of parks are often a really, really great way to entertain kids for, next to no money. So we can go ahead and skip to the next one. So this is a picture, of course, of one of the city leisure centers. So like the city parks, the city leisure centers will often have a wide variety of things that you can do, and usually at a pretty reasonable price. So these things may include like swimming, skating, working out at a gym, sports programs. There are often many kinds of different classes that you can look into, and you can contact the city to ask about their offerings and find a location that best fits your needs. So usually within the city of Calgary, you can do that by just calling 311, and you can tell them where you are, and they can tell you about which locations are close to you and what you might be able to do at each of those locations. So they're often very knowledgeable about what's going on in the city, and they might be able to kind of help you explore what's available in that regard. So we can move on to the next one. So this one is a little bit to a smaller extent. This is the community centers. So like the leisure centers, the community resource centers in the city will often have many different offerings for things that you can do with your kids. Now, of course, Chris was kind enough to warn me that some of these programs are targeted more towards mothers and their children, which is a really unfortunate fact of things. That's something that we all know too well, but it's nevertheless a decent idea to contact them and see what is available. As a bonus, many of the community centers, they're more like at least family program oriented. So you might be able to access them for supports other than just entertainment. So for example, some of them may have access to food or clothing programs for families that are really struggling. And still others even have financial supports available for families with things like, if you're falling behind on rent or utilities, but you can kind of call and ask each of the community centers what's available at them. And usually they'll target the neighborhoods kind of closest to you. So you can call and ask what's available. So we can move on to the next one. Now, this one is one that I am personally very familiar with because actually I worked as a 211 operator for many years, actually during my volunteer time with CCMF. So 211 is the community resource line, and there's usually a 211 actually available in every province, but 211 is essentially a set of operators with an access to an expansive database for tons of different community programs. So you might be able to ask them about available different sports or leisure activities, but far more than that, you can ask for help with finding many other kinds of critical programs, such as mental health supports, excuse me, school supports, parenting resources, all kinds of things. 211 is a really great resource to have, and it's super easy to access. And it's also 24/7. So, even if you're up in the middle of the night having trouble sleeping, trying to figure out what to do with something, you can give them a call and they can help you out. You can also call them without a clear idea of what you're looking for, and they'll be able to kind of help you with narrowing down some ideas about like what might be able to best suit your needs. So I very much recommend them. Now, one fair warning is being a province-wide service, their usefulness is a little bit more targeted towards the big cities because their database is kind of updated by what businesses have essentially submitted their information into their database for acceptance. So unfortunately, a lot of that is kind of restricted to the big cities, but they are getting bigger and bigger every time. And they are even able to sometimes help with kind of looking into what's available in the smaller cities as well. So it can be worth a call, even if you live in some of the less populous areas of the province. Okay, so we can move to the next one. All right, so this one is a little bit more available to everybody, and that is just, plain and simple, driving out of town to watch the stars. So this one was always a favorite of mine growing up. If you can get to any area where the light pollution is lessened, you can have an awesome time with your kids picking out constellations and watching for shooting stars and satellites. I know personally, I found that some of the more mountainous areas near Banff and that kind of thing was a really, really great place to get out to look at the stars. Just, bring along a blow up mattress and set it up on top of your car if you've got a big car, or beside if you don't. You don't have to have a telescope for something like this, but it can be a cool addition to add to the experience. Well, when only virtual meeting, that does kind of limit what you're able to do, unfortunately. But that might actually be a little bit more relevant to the latter half of the presentation, which is things that you can do at home. I feel like a lot of what is available at home is something that can be cobbled together to do on the virtual side of things, but it might make more sense once we actually get to that aspect. So I'll definitely get back to you, and thank you for that question. Oh, I see that Sean just put his hand up again. So go ahead and jump in.
Sorry to be that annoying guy. So there is
Gosh, not at all.
there is a really, really beautiful place about an hour and a half North Frontenac, outside of Ottawa, for stargazing. The problem is my kids, they're really sweet. They go to bed though at 6 and 8. So I don't know, like, and it's absolutely stunning. Like the stars, like I when I saw it for the first time, there's like no light pollution. It's not too far from Kingston. But
Yeah.
What would you suggest in a case like that? Should I let them maybe take a nap in the afternoon and say, okay, guys, we're going to get in the car? Or what? Because I think they would think this is so cool, but I don't know what to do, because they would also complain they're tired.
Right.
So I don't know what suggestion you could maybe make.
Well, what I would say in that case is, maybe you could kind of preface it by saying, hey, how would you guys feel about maybe doing something special and staying up late, a little bit late tonight to do something? And I feel like a lot of kids would think, oh, staying up late, that this is, this is something exciting. We never get to do that.
That would be my daughter, but not my son.
Okay.
Believe it or not. My daughter is a rambunctious one. I don't know what happened. But yeah, my son's more the rule follower, quiet. He'd probably be knocked out by about 8. And my daughter maybe would stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning if I let her. Just as long as she's next to dad. So, but do you have any? I guess he just falls asleep. Is that what we would do?
Well, I mean, I suppose that's not out of the realm of reason, right? To just be like, okay, well, I'm going to crash in the back seat of the car, bring along a couple of pillows and a blanket or something just in case, or maybe a late dinner or something if you want to try and get them to stay up a little bit later. Especially considering it's just a once in a while activity. I would hope that nobody would fault you for, breaking the schedule for once in a while, but I know that sometimes that's not always the case. So your mileage may vary on that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Okay. But, and also thank you for the suggestions for where to go as well. Like it's always nice to be able to find those places without any light pollution, because I feel like they're getting harder and harder to find. I know when I was younger, I used to go camping down in Waterton, which is just like South Alberta, right close to the border of Canada and the US. And there was just barely any light pollution at all, and it's absolutely beautiful. So you kind of gotta look around and find your own places where that would work for you. And of course, as Sean wisely presented, you got to make sure to do it in a way that's going to work with everybody's schedules. But if you can manage to get it to work out, it can be a really special activity for you and your kids. So we can kind of move on to the next one now. and which of course is hiking. Now, this is a little bit more of a daytime oriented activity. So this can be a little bit of a compromise in some cases where you might find that stargazing is maybe not the right kind of thing, but this can be done in any of the parks in the city, or in any city really. Or if you're so inclined, you can drive to more rugged terrain and try some mountain trails. Now, I know like here in Alberta, of course, we have like Banff, we have Lake Louise. Now, I know that there are also a lot of people like from out of the province as well. So you might have to kind of look and see what's around, but this can be a really wonderful thing to do with your kids. It's not only really excellent exercise, but you can even make this thing more interactive by taking along like nature guidebooks or binoculars and trying to look for different species of plants, animals, birds. We're, like right around here, we're truly fortunate, I feel, to have some beautiful natural landmarks with waterfalls and mountains. And many of these things can be accessed without paying out the nose to access them. So I really encourage you to be able to take your kids to that. A lot of them will just really marvel at some of the sites that are available. Okay, and on to the next one. And of course, what children doesn't like to have access to cute animals? So the next thing that we had in the list is going to, pet stores or shelters. And, not necessarily to be like, okay, let's, time to get you a kitten, but this is it, even just a matter of like going and seeing the animals that are on offer at the shelters. Can be really exciting for a lot of little kids, especially younger children. And many shelters will happily let people borrow brushes and toys to keep the animals entertained. And it can even be a really great place for kids to get a first volunteer experience as well. So that there's lots of different things that you can do at shelters. So that's a really high up there activity. And as with pet stores, there's a little bit of a different set of offerings that you might be able to get than at a shelter. So I know when I was a little kid, I used to really like walking through all of the fish tanks and seeing all of the different colors of fish or the different lizards. And like these things can be entertaining for a long time. So that's another great offer. So
I would even offer, sorry, Tanis.
no, please jump in. I feel like I'm talking fast. Sorry.
I know, when you're doing such a great job, like I don't want to just hop in on you there, but I just wanted to share that I take my daughters to a pet store too. And if you're in Calgary, and I know not all of you are, but if you're in Calgary, there's a pet store in McKnight, and they actually let the puppies out to play. And I've got pictures of my girls just being swarmed by puppies. And if you don't have much, like it's something to see your little one smile and something like that. So I just thought I'd offer that. Like it's a hell of a thing to see your kids smile and having fun like that with them. So
absolutely. And it especially, if you don't have pets of your own at your house, that can be a special treat for kids getting to access that when they don't normally have access to it. I know growing up, my dad was unfortunately allergic to animals, so I never had any pets growing up of any kind. So getting to go to a pet store and just see all the little kittens everywhere squeaking away, I just died every time. So all right, so we can move on to the next slide. And again, I want to reiterate, like, please, if you have something to say, like, just jump in, because I know that I'm kind of going through everything fast. So I don't want to just control the conversation. I am enjoying the engagement. So the next one on here, and this is the last one in the out of the house category, which is just, plain old sledding and tobogganing. So for the most part, this is a winter activity, of course, going down snowy hills on a sled, disc, or crazy carpet. But if you get creative about this, you can find places like a steep, grassy, or sandy hill and use a crazy carpet to slide down these as well. I mean, you don't even have to go that far. You can even use a flat piece of cardboard if you really want to go super basic with it. So yeah, this has kind of been the last little while. We've gone over several activities that you can do out of the house, but naturally it's important to talk about different things you can do in the house. I know, especially coming out of COVID, I'm sure we all have our own ways of dealing with things in the house, but it's good to have different ways. And I think we can all feel a little bit guilty of feeling like we get stuck in a holding pattern at home, like there's nothing to do, or we're just doing the same things over and over again. But you'd be surprised at the variety of things that you can do at home. So we'll jump to the next slide. Barrel rolling down the hill. Oh goodness. To be young and to be able to manage that again. I used to love doing that myself. My family rarely let me because of grass stains, but you know, hey, that's what detergent is for, right? All right. So of course, the first standby that we have here is movies and popcorn. You know, that's the good old fashioned popcorn and movie night is always a good one to turn to. There are lots of relatively inexpensive options for online movie rentals these days, or you could always use options like Netflix or Disney Plus or any of those kinds of things as well to have access to a broader range of videos all at once. A lot of younger children especially love the spectacle of popping popcorn with an oil or air popper. So making a giant bowl of popcorn, or realistically any salty snacks, and tucking into a movie or even movie marathon can be a really great way to spend an evening. So the next slide, please. So this one is YouTube exercise or yoga videos. So this is kind of, it's a similar and yet different vein. So on just going on YouTube, assuming you have access to the internet, you can pull up all kinds of different video series on YouTube. You can use them for tons of different indoor activities. So like in this case, you can pull up exercise or yoga videos that you can do together. And there are lots of great videos like that that are specifically targeted to children's sensibilities that they may find enjoyable. So, you know, like many of you might be familiar with like Barney from 20 years ago or more. Might be showing my age a little bit there, but yeah, and those kinds of shows used to have all kinds of fun little kinetic activities that you could do with the shows, but now YouTube is kind of a different alternative that you can use to get the same thing with less of the annoying purple dinosaur. So this can be especially helpful for burning up energy on days where it's way too hot outside to get out and exercise, or way too cold, as we're going to be getting into in probably about 3 or 4 weeks if I know Canada. All right, so we can move on to the next one.
No, I might be willing to offer too. And again, from my experiences, is that another source of maybe things like this, if you don't have even internet or anything like that, is it's often you can find somebody who's willing to give away like an old DVD player at a garage sale for something really cheap, or Craigslist, I think there's like a free sale or something like that as well. And then usually people have stacks of old movies too that they want to give away. So it's not even necessarily if even the $25 is a little bit too much, like I experienced, there's other ways that you can find that too. And my kids didn't care if it was on an old CRT type television. It was just a matter of spending that time and having something to do. So those are other ideas in case that's even tough too. So
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and thank you for, you know, bringing up like the fact that some people don't even have access to like the barest minimums. So trying to find ways to incorporate that kind of thing in there is really important. Like even visiting like garage sales, you might be able to find some like really inexpensive things, like, you know, 25-cent old DVDs or Blu-rays, and those are all really great ideas. Okay. Oh, that's nice. Rory just posted in the chat. If anyone lives near Edmonton, I have lots of stuff to help out, including a DVD player and some kids' movies that mine have outgrown. And that's really amazing. Like, I'm so glad to have people in this chat and in this webinar just like offering to help each other. And that's something I'm really hoping for this Fueling Fathers series, is that, not only will we have lots of information on offer to people who are coming, but it's not so much of a formal thing. It's a thing where we can all come together, we can all share tips, we can all share ways to help each other. So I really love that kind of thing. And that's the kind of spirit that we want to embody in these meetings. So that's super awesome. Thank you. All right, so this next one that we have here is singing and or karaoke. So obviously this is one that only works if you like to sing, but especially for little children, even if you're not particularly good at it, it can still be fun to rock out to your favorite songs, either from your own personal collection, even if it's just like CDs on an old player or whatever, or from songs that you can also find on YouTube. YouTube's actually a really great place to pull off songs from really popular children's cartoons like the Disney princess movies or theme songs for other children's shows. You can even go one step further and turn it into a dance party. So again, there's lots of different ways to have fun with that. So we can go to the next slide, which is fort building. This is a fun one to try and see just how many different creative ways you can turn different household furniture and other objects into forts. So, collect all the pillows and couch cushions in the house and turn them all into a massive castle. Go to the nearest cardboard recycling facility and bring home as many cardboard boxes as you can to build a giant box fort, or even a labyrinth out in the yard. Take the absolute largest blanket in the house that you have and tie it over top a table to make a hammock fit for small children. Actually, with very small children, it's often as simple as finding all the different ways you can just wrap them up in blankets. So it doesn't even have to be about forts. It can just be about how many things can we stack on top of this child, making sure to have appropriate air access, of course. So,
one of the things I did in this case, Tanis, would be sometimes we would make an adventure out of it too, right? Where you create like a story or a narrative and you're building the fort for it, and then get your kids to like draw pictures that you can put inside the fort. So like if you're on a spaceship, make it spaceship like, and then you can have some sort of adventure or something like that. So
that's awesome. And I actually knew somebody who built like an entire Gundam cardboard box armor suit for their kid. And, it cost them barely anything at all except for the cardboard and the tape. But the kid looked actually amazing. And it was just colored with markers and it looked so well put together, and it was just cardboard boxes. So there's tons that you can do to turn that sort of thing into a story. Have lots of cardboard tube sword fights, things like that. So yeah, that's great. So we can move on to the next one, which is scavenger hunts. You don't have to wait for something like Easter to plan a big scavenger hunt around the house. Children of all ages would love to wake up in the morning to search for candy or other treats hidden in, as easy or as difficult places as you'd like. And it doesn't even have to be something like that. It can also be, out of door nature things like who can be the first to find a grasshopper or a ladybug or something like that, right? Or a dandelion. You can write up a list of clues to help guide children to find things if you're feeling especially creative. You can create themes and hide certain kinds of toys, or if you don't prefer to fill up your kid's toy box or stomach with junk food, you can simply hide paper riddles that lead up to the next paper riddle until they reach the end and maybe find some kind of prize. So you can do this both in the house and outside in the yard, or both. Or even if you feel like, going a little bit further, you can try and set something up at the local playground. But of course, then you have to worry about other kids finding the scavenger hunt clues. So just be wary of that.
I would even say geocaching, if you have the availability to, you can combine that with hiking.
Oh, that would be so cool. There we go. Awesome. Yeah, there we go. That would be really cool. All right, so I think we can move on to the next one, which is Mission Impossible style obstacle courses. I don't know how many of the people on this call maybe had in their elementary school setting up some kind of crazy Mission Impossible style obstacle course to go through for one period in gym class. But I know my school used to set up these crazy obstacle courses with netting and bean bags and everything. And they would play like crazy music in the background that you'd feel like a badass going through. So yeah, so you can kind of do this in a massive variety of ways at home. So, if you don't have access to netting, you can, use blankets to set up tunnels for kids to crawl through where they can't touch the sides, with bean bags or other things set out as bombs that they can't touch. If you can set up like balance beams for them to walk across, or make string laser puzzles, because you don't want to use real lasers. That's probably not super safe. But if you use strings that they have to climb or duck through, that can be a really awesome one. You can create like any number of tasks like this, one after the other. And if they hit any of the off limits objects, then it's back to the start, which can be especially fun with multiple children because they can take turns if they fail, and then it builds up a great amount of anticipation to try again. And you can make it as thematic as you want. You can play exciting music in the background. You can play with like lighting and darkness in the room. And you can use creative timing mechanisms to force them to pause and consider their next moves. Anything. You can come up with any number of different things. I don't know if anybody has any techniques they would want to add to make that more exciting, but yeah, that's just a few things that I came up with.
Thank you. Good, Thomas.
Okay, so moving on to the next one then. Of course, campfire and marshmallows and hot dogs. So this can be a great one to do either away from home or, even in your own backyard if you have the space for it. Obviously, you want to be safe with this kind of thing. Kids often love playing with cooking things in the fire, or, even just tossing things in the fire and watching them burn up. Of course, it's up to all of you to supervise and ensure that they are doing this safely. But I know when I was young, it was always fun to just take one marshmallow and just toss it into the fire and watch it turn into a burning crisp of lava. But you can combine this with multiple activities such as singing songs or telling ghost stories, or even just talking about what's been going on for everyone. I feel like, there's a lot of different ways to sit around and just have that kind of close one-on-one conversation. So this can be a really great way to kind of facilitate that. Yes, great for teaching life skills and fire building and safety. Absolutely. Definitely. Okay. And so the next one is, identifying plants and or insects. So this may be more or less feasible depending on the size or existence of your yard and what kinds of plants are in it. But you can go out and try to see how many different bugs or plants you can identify, and even see what kinds of additional facts you can learn about what's around you. For example, my own daughter was delighted to recently learn that you are, in fact, able to eat dandelions. And as soon as she learned this information, she ran and picked the first one she found in somebody else's yard to convince us to try and eat it right then and there. I, of course, had to explain to her the need to properly grow them in a garden to ensure no contamination with pesticides. But regardless, lots of fun ways to kind of, turn that into an educational experience. And speaking of educational experience, we can move on to the next one, which is looking up recipes online and try to learn to cook together. This is absolutely a wonderful bonding activity in more ways than you might think. So there are so many different websites accessible online, again, assuming that you have access to websites online. But again, if you're able to get to the library or something similar, you can often get some from there and take them back home. But you can experiment with many different cuisines and get a feel for what styles of food you all enjoy. So if you have, say, a spice rack, it can be fun to let your children smell and even taste every different spice to get a feel for what they like and don't like. This can help provide clues for which kinds of foods they might be interested in trying. And it's great for, expanding one's palate as well. Not only that, but cooking is a skill, and by practicing together, you may be surprised at how easy it can become. Moreover, your children will likely be extremely grateful as they grow and eventually move into adulthood that they have these new cooking skills under their belt, so that they don't need to subsist on canned food and ramen when they first strike out on their own. I know I really wish that I'd had much more chances to cook with my parents when I was growing up, because I had to kind of learn from scratch. But one of the first things that we did with our daughter was to have her go through the spice rack and be like, this is sage. This is what sage tastes and smells like. And she was just delighted by that. And of course, she was only like 1-2 years old when we started doing that. So that's a really great way to do things with your kids. So we'll move on to the next one, which is.
Can I share?
Yes, please.
So my daughters learned how to make microwavable mug cakes with household ingredients instead of the one. They learned how to do that at the age of 8, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Got older, we learned how to make homemade bread, and very simple ingredients. And if you're on a budget, like, it's also helpful from that perspective too. So you can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You can make really simple but tasty homemade things and enjoy that time with your kids. And I agree with Tana so much. Like, the life skills that they learn, they carry that with them as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
So 19 and eating craft dinner like I was at 19, right? So
yeah,
thanks.
Absolutely. It's so important, and trying to incorporate that into fun activities that you can do together is really an awesome way to help kids develop, and also to build those memories together, right?
Yeah, I agree. I'm just gonna jump in. Sorry, guys. I was just thinking of kind of how we can incorporate virtual hangouts with kids that maybe they're not in the same city, or we have to do phone calls and stuff. And I think cooking is one of those ones that you can manage to do together over the phone or over Skype or over Zoom, where you keep those household ingredients nearby, and maybe the kiddos have the household ingredients on their end as well. And you're building those mug cakes together, and then you're able to do something together even though you're not physically together.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really great idea. And I think that we can really do that with the next one that I've got on the screen here as well, which is just, in general, educational games. So this is, it kind of depends on the age of the child, of course. But you can basically come up with a number of games to help them like develop and sharpen their minds. So for younger children, this might be a game of practicing what letters look like, or playing around with sounds, or getting an armful of colorful blocks and just using them to demonstrate basic addition and subtraction. And for older children, you might have fun with things like collaborative story writing or logic puzzles. And these are easily things that can be done online as well, so that you don't have to feel like you have no options if you're just talking to your kids online or over the phone. There's lots of different ways to make that accessible. And I know we're kind of starting to run a little bit short on time, so I think I'm going to try and run through the next couple of things a little bit more quickly as well. Somebody just posted a link in the chat that might be helpful, that might have some interesting things to look at there as well. Caribou.com. So that could be a good one to look into. And we can go on to the next slide as well. Which is just your basic, like very basic finances, like showing kids, here is what a nickel looks like, here's what a quarter looks like. I know that was one of my favorite activities with my mom when I was a kid, was just her like showing me her, like what was in her purse at the time. Like this is what money looks like, right? Like this, like these are little coins. And I loved being able to find the differences in coins. I know when I found one of those old pennies with like a bird on it or something like that, I was delighted to find out, whoa, there's different coins with different pictures on them. And you know, she's started a lifelong coin collecting tendency in me. So that's kind of a fun thing that you can do with them. And then we can move on to the next one, which is household science projects. And these are projects that can often be done with very basic things that you can find in your house. Like I've got a couple of different pictures of ones here. I know the one at the bottom is kind of cut off, but that's just Diet Coke and Mentos. You can see it kind of shooting in the bottom here. The one in the bottom corner, that's cornstarch and water, which, I mean, many of you probably know about non-Newtonian fluids and how much fun that can be to play with children. The main one up here in the top corner is just an egg after it's been placed in vinegar, and children can be delighted to see that the vinegar will actually erode away the eggshell and make the egg soft and translucent like this. And then in the other corner, that's something called a mold terrarium. You know, you just take various food clippings that would have otherwise gone in the garbage or the compost and just put them in a container, and then you and your kids together can watch the way this collection of foods will just change over time and get moldy, and it can be a real delight for them to see how that looks. And then of course in the other bottom corner here is just different kinds of household liquids that you might find. So rubbing alcohol, canola oil, water, dish soap, and just seeing how all of these things kind of mix together and make different layers that, you know, don't combine. You can add food coloring and make it even more of a delightful experience. So then we can kind of jump to the next one as well, which is just your basic arts and crafts. So yet again, another hands-on project that you can do with your children. And there's tons of different ways that you can do this sort of thing. So of course, in the top, we have, you know, cutting out paper squares to make snowflakes. You can play with yarn and pipe cleaners and things that you can get at the dollar store for next to no money, and make them into cute little pictures like these clouds and rainbows. The one down here in the bottom left corner is actually wax paper and crayon shavings. And then you run an iron or something else kind of hot over top of that, and you can melt the crayon shavings and make these wonderful rainbow landscapes. And then the last one is just a leaf rubbing. So you go outside and you get different kinds of leaves, and you have pencil crayons, and you can just rub the different leaves on the paper, and it looks kind of cool. So there's lots of different ways that you can make, you know, different art projects with your kids. And I wanted to include the last couple of slides here, some mental health pieces to kind of keep in mind with many of these activities, because I know a lot of the people that are going through our programs, you know, they'll be having lots of mental health challenges owing to some very stressful situations that they might be going through. So I thought it would be helpful to kind of just include some of those mental health pieces to consider as you're building these activities to help build up mental wellness. So for example, many of what we talked about is in accessing green spaces. And as many of you might know, green spaces, they have a really important effect on one's mental health and well-being. They have a calming effect. They can have positive effects on, you know, both anxiety and depression, and they can help people to feel more grounded. So being able to access these kind of green and like natural spaces, especially when we're all surrounded by screens and other artificial scenes for most of our lives, returning to these natural spaces can be very effective for kind of bringing one down and grounding oneself. So that can be a really important thing to consider. We can go to the next slide, which is just how exercise, different forms of exercise can help the body. And this can happen in many different ways. So, it increases production of, feel good endorphins. It improves memory. It lengthens attention span, to say nothing of the physical benefits that it has on our systems, right? So physical exercise is like so important for regulating so many different things. It helps people to be able to sleep better at night as well, which also then snowballs into improving anxiety and depression. So all good things to consider when you're planning activities. So moving on to the next slide, which is basically trying to eat a better, more balanced diet. So if you're trying to find ways to learn to cook with your children, this can then, you can learn creative ways to incorporate more healthy foods, like not even necessarily expensive foods, but even like inexpensive things like beans and things like that. You can often get frozen vegetables that are less expensive than fresh vegetables. If finances are a difficulty for you, you can find ways to incorporate all of these healthy foods into your diet for less of a cost, and it can have such a massive improvement on your overall wellness. Eating healthy food over a longer period of time helps to improve one's gut biome, which you'd be surprised at how much that impacts one's wellness. So learning to cook can really help improve that. You'd be surprised. So then moving on to the next one, which is basically just how practicing skills with your children, like building these challenging mental activities, doing the skills games, and like having them develop all of these different experiences, it can really help improve self-confidence, which can manifest in a number of different ways in their lives, right? Like it can improve school performance, it can improve the ways that they interact with their peers. It can be useful for a number of different things. And then the last slide, of course, there's just the overall benefits of spending time with your children. It's beneficial for you, it's beneficial for them. It's really helpful for building that secure attachment, which if any of you are familiar with attachment theory, that having that secure attachment is not only really important in a younger child's life, but as they grow up and then go on to build relationships themselves, it's much more beneficial for them in learning to have successful, healthy relationships going forward. So yeah, sorry to kind of feel like I had to rush through the last little bit of that one there, but I did want to try and make sure to get in all of those pieces before the end of the presentation. So that being said, if anybody has any final thoughts or questions that they would like to add, please feel free to do so now. Right, Marie says lots of fantastic ideas in here. Thanks for the suggestions. Definitely going to utilize lots of these, which is awesome.